Hey folks, it's Fernando doing another video here for TheModernSurvivalist. Still more information, actually great information coming out of Ukraine. I already did a video last week about 12 lessons learned, 12 survival lessons to be learned from people in Ukraine, but still some great first-hand accounts of how people deal with the problems over there. This has been translated by Sigata from a Russian forum. I'm going to be leaving the link below to the post in my website, TheModernSurvivalist, in case you prefer to read it. But still, I wanted to do a video about it because there's so much great information, and as always, it's better when you learn these things from other people's experience rather than wait until you have to deal with something like this yourself. Fortunately, none of us will have to deal with a foreign invading force. None of us will have to deal with Russia invading our country, right? But still, even though, and this is important, guys, you don't have to think of it this way. You don't have to think of it of, well, I'm here in the United States, I'm here in Louisiana or in Los Angeles or wherever it is that you are in the States. What can I possibly learn from someone that's being invaded by Russia? That's not the point. You still have all these little lessons, even things such as how to deal with roadblocks. You may be thinking, well, Russia's not invading. I'm not going to be learning anything from this. Well, actually, I have a good friend of mine that during Katrina, he went over there to help. He got stopped by local police, and he got his weapons taken away from him in the United States in spite of the Second Amendment. So this would be a good example of how, for example, dealing with a roadblock, yeah, sure, apply specifically to Russian roadblocks or Ukrainian roadblocks in eastern Ukraine, but also the way you handle law enforcement or military personnel during a stop is important as well. Little things that may get you in trouble or not in Ukraine may apply during a widespread disaster in the States, or maybe a terrorist attack. So, and then you have how people deal with power outages, how people deal with a lack of food or very high prices. I mean, when I was reading some of the accounts of folks dealing with very high inflation, one of the things that people were saying in Ukraine, in some of the eastern cities closer to the Russian border, was that the problem was not that there was a lack of food. Stores had lots of food. People didn't have the money to buy it because of the loss of value, because of the inflation of the Ukrainian currency. That's something that I can perfectly relate to based on my experience in Argentina. And we're talking about Ukraine war with Russia, all right? Very different, completely different situation, but still all these little similarities. So don't just think that there's nothing to be learned. There's always great information out there. Let's start here. Bugging in, bugging out, and where to live. This was posted by Bofors 30. Again, this is a Russian forum that has been translated, some of the posts from people over there. I'm going to be going through some of them. When it was just starting in Kiev, nobody was worried. Yeah, typical thing of, you know, this is not going to be happening. When there's a disaster, the first reaction people have is, this won't be as bad. This won't get worse than it already is. And then when it does get very bad, probably lots of people in Ukraine were feeling this way. When it does get that bad, they go like, no, this is not happening. Denial is the other common thing. All right. Actually, a great line here. First decision you have to make is to evacuate or to stay. This is a great point. This is something that I try to address in Bugging Out and Relocating, my second book, specifically about, you know, bugging out and relocating, this kind of thing. And that is a key question. Not only did I cover it in my book, but also in different videos here in the channel and posts in my website as well. How do you make that decision? It's not always easy, you know. Are things going to be getting better? So should I stay and just cope with it until it gets better? Or, man, is this something that I really should be leaving? No simple answer. I think that in the case of Ukraine, I would have left many months ago. I mean, last year, when Crimea was annexed and Russia took over Crimea, I already did a video on that several months ago, and in that moment I would have left Eastern Ukraine for sure. Of course, there's people that didn't have the means or maybe hesitated a little bit too long, and again, great points regarding that. But if there are roadblocks set, it's too late to evacuate. This thing about sometimes it's just too damn late. You waited too long. You waited too long, you don't have the possibility anymore. Or maybe you do have it, but it's much, much harder than it used to be. Especially horrible, there were groups of cars with signs that said children that tried to pretty much storm through the roadblocks under gunfire. There were lots of these. Later, about a month after that, there were the same thing going on opposite direction. Usually first evacuation spikes after the place is shelled for the first time. The summer people usually were going to south to the beach. In reality, the real combat could have started a month or even more later. Don't think you can get away using back roads. Actually, a great point as well. Usually there are patrols on most of them and on nearby altitudes, and any movement there could be treated as enemy sabotage reconnaissance groups, and now there are mines everywhere. The safest way out for the family is through the main road and roadblocks. Excellent, great points. Survival folklore says that the way you leave during a disaster is you always take the secondary roads. Reality for people in Ukraine is that that sort of attitude can get you killed because it's considered as enemies maneuvering around a roadblock. So it's the thing, folks, about survival and preparedness. There's no simple, easy answers. When there's a black and white answer to something, it's usually wrong. It's all very complex, all very different from one specific scenario to the other. You can learn different things, but you have to take it as it comes and apply to each specific case. Sure, if you're evacuating because of a flood, because of a natural disaster, main roads are probably full of stuck vehicles, and secondary roads or alternative roads make sense. You may have better ideas there. Now, in this case, for example, with a foreign force taking control of the region, setting roadblocks, and if you want to evacuate that place, you're not taking these alternative routes because it looks very suspicious, and you can even have mines, or you can just be shot on sight because it's considered extremely suspicious to act that way. And the safest route is through the main road, through the roadblock. Just be careful how you handle it. Don't have any suspicious material. Probably you want to be getting rid of most weapons as well, because most of them will be likely to get you into trouble. I think that it was for shotguns and such that people were allowed to go through, but anything that looked a little bit more militaristic was potentially dangerous. Rifles with scopes apparently was a very big deal, because immediately Russians and Ukrainians alike considered a scoped rifle, which most Americans would consider a classic hunting rifle. In this case, because of the war, it was considered a sniper weapon, as it actually is. You know, a bolt-action rifle with a scope. Not much of a difference between a sniper rifle and a deer hunting rifle. Don't think you can get away using back roads. Great points regarding that. Probably the best prepping for situations like this is having some money in some stable currency. Does that ring a bell at all? Again, probably the best prepping for situations like that is having some money in some stable currency. You can buy what you need, especially in big cities, or you can use those monies to settle in a new place. Guys, I've said this for years, and it's now being said by some guy in Ukraine that finds himself in a very tough situation. Money gets you out of these places. Money buys you a safe place to be in. Money buys you transportation, buys you food. How many times have we gone through the value of money in this channel? how important it is. Money is the most versatile, most powerful tool you can have in modern times. All right, it doesn't make a difference if it's Ukraine, the United States, or Latin America. Money still gives you lots and lots of options. Having it in a stable currency, because the local currency was losing value so much. What's better, city car or four-wheel drive? The thing is, even outside an ATO zone, you got only through roadblocks. Of course, if you have a four-wheel drive, you can try to ride through a field or forest. But first of all, if any military see you, that would try to stop you, or just will start shooting at you either side, because there are lots of sabotage reconnaissance groups. And second, there are mines. Again, problems with mines and off-road vehicles offering you the possibility of going off-road, but maybe getting you in trouble with military personnel. There are no jobs at all. Government workers are working pretty much for free. I have heard of people getting a can of canned food and 2 tea bags for a week of work. Basically, people being paid with a little bit of food. I'm not leaving because of my farm, and the farm gives me hope for more or less normal life in any case. Excellent point regarding having all your eggs in one basket. If you have a farm and your livelihood depends on that farm, you don't have much of an option regarding leaving. Sometimes that can be an asset. Sometimes having a farm with locally grown produce, or simply having the extra room, or having an orchard and having fruit trees and such, that's all great. Having your own animals, chickens, eggs, rabbits, cows, that's all fantastic. But sometimes mobility is also a great option. In this time and age, if you could give me the options between choosing between having a farm or having the possibility of working online, working through using internet from anywhere in the world, that would be really a great asset, because it allows you the freedom of movement and you're not stuck in one place. Having a homestead with all these things, the typical survivalist homestead, has some advantages, has lots of disadvantages as well, and it's not always ideal for what it was supposed to be well suited. If you look on most of the YouTube videos regarding survival preparedness, they will be thinking that if there's a widespread disaster with anarchy and war, you would be better off in a farm growing your food, fighting off the zombies and raiders, and making it off in the bunker with the rest of the survivalists. Real world says otherwise. Real world says that when it really gets that bad, you have to get out of there. You don't stay there, all right? If you stay, you die. And guys, this isn't about a patriotic duty and such. I'm talking specifically about survival, about staying alive. Actually, in most cases, there's lots of examples of people in Ukraine that left the eastern cities that were being attacked and invaded by Russia. They left, took their families to safer places in the West, and then came back and fought because they felt that was their duty. But first of all, you get out of there. First of all, you get your family to safety. Then you can come back. But at least you have the option. You have that option of putting your family first in a safe place, then coming back and fighting for your country because you feel it as a patriotic duty. But it's just staying there maybe doesn't help anyone. Bugging in, if you are living in a large apartment, you have no choice but to move to your relatives or look for an abandoned house. In an apartment building, everything is against you. Height provokes hits by shelling. Yeah, this is typical. In a city that's being shelled, being in an apartment building is a pretty bad idea. Heating, this is something also that I've learned from researching other disasters regarding warfare and bombs and such, especially in cold climates. the shelling, the bombing, what happens is that it blows up all the windows in the entire neighborhood. Pretty much you have blocks of houses without windows. And without windows, there's no way of keeping the heat inside. So combining that with a lack of electricity or fuel for heating, it makes for very cold, miserable living conditions. A typical thing that is very high regarded during times like those, plastic sheets for closing windows, the plastic sheeting in rolls. They just duct tape or staple those with a staple gun to the side of the frame of the window, improvising sort of a window. And the plastic is, of course, a little bit more resistant than glass. Running to shelters nearby, running to a shelter from a fourth floor on an unexpected shelling is useless. Water, tap water, if working, is of horrible quality compared to melted snow. The importance of the typical supplies that you need: food, water. Doesn't matter if it's war, doesn't matter if it's inflation, doesn't matter if it's a loss of employment. You still need food and water. Those two are part of the essential basics that you have to cover. Yeah, I definitely recommend reading the article, because this is one of the kind of things that I like doing the video, because there's always little things that come to mind and such. But the post, which I'm going to be leaving the link there below, is actually quite long, and it's packed with great information regarding clothing. The idea of all of a sudden camo clothing got you in trouble. Even in Ukraine, where a camouflage type of clothing was very common, extremely common, in spite of that, when the conflict starts and when you have all these roadblocks and checkpoints, camo gets you in trouble. Even green color gets you in trouble because it looks militarized, because both factions are suspicious about it, and you're either going to be getting beaten up to see if there's something that you have to say, or you maybe even get shot over it. So you have to look, the gray man approach is extremely important in this kind of situation, all right? Again, a topic that I've covered many times, both in videos and in posts in The Modern Survivalist. But the gray man approach, not looking militaristic, in this case in particular, not having equipment, for example, binoculars, a map, GPS, all those things are extremely suspicious and can get you killed by either faction because you may be considered a spy, all right? So you have to be very careful, maybe even get rid of these before going through a checkpoint. It's not worth gambling your life. What else? Yeah, I'm trying to keep this as short as possible. The importance of clothing. Yeah, during the checkpoints, they take away your smartphone, all right? You're leaving with your smartphone. The checkpoint, the soldier grabs your smartphone, goes through your contacts. If they find a phone number that is from an outside region, it's suspicious. They look into your Facebook, your photographs. You have a photograph with a group of Ukrainians or Russians, either faction will consider that an issue to be addressed and further questioning. So just a fantastic information overall. Radios, equipment, all that stuff, it's pretty complicated. Medical care, you know, pretty much non-existent because of what's going on. And yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. If you have the time, do check the link with the article. It's quite long, but packed with information. Folks, this is the kind of stuff that I have, of course, covered, as I said before, in Bugging Out and Relocating, my second book. If you're interested more in learning more about survival in an economic crisis like what I saw in Argentina, my first book, The Modern Survival Manual, may be a little bit more relevant for someone in the U.S. Thinking of more complications down the road, the kind of disaster more likely to happen? Yeah, probably an economic crisis is indeed more likely than being invaded by Russia. But being invaded by Russia provides lots of real-world first-hand experience that we can all learn from. Guys, it's gonna be all for now. Take care, subscribe and share as always. Take care and see you in our next video.